The Ventura County Wildfire Collaborative is made up, we have a growing membership, and we're made up of the Ventura County RCD, that's myself, Ventura County Fire Department, Ojai Valley Fire Safe Council, Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council, Bell Canyon Fire Safe Council, and newly added Oak Park Fire Safe Council, as well as fire engineers Jensen Hughes. And we have a wide range of current projects. They include outreach and education, hazard and vulnerability mapping, a pilot project and evacuation assessment happening in Ojai Valley, and the recent completion of the countywide Community Wildfire Protection Plan, so congrats on that. And of course, hosting this conference. If you'd like to learn anything else or anything more about the Ventura County Wildfire Collaborative and the work we do and the work that we would like to do, we do have a table down here right next to CAWFC, so come pay us a visit. Thank you again all so much for coming. I'm going to pass it over to Tegan Hoffman, who is the Executive Director of my hosting partner, Coastal Quest, and she's going to lead us through the day. Thank you again all so much.
Thank you, Mason. And good morning, everyone. It's so great to see so many people joining us today. And I want to thank our amazing speakers this morning. Great job. Really enjoyed listening to all of you and the various perspectives. So thank you, Alan Salazar, Chief Dustin Gardner, Chief Daniel Burren, and Victor Stephenson, especially for your long trip across the Pacific Ocean. So as Mason mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of Coastal Quest, and we focus on building resilience in coastal communities, of which Ventura County is a coastal community. And we started working in Ventura County in 2020 along the Santa Clara River and coast, a vulnerable region to climate change. And the community members there really wanted to focus on building wildfire resilience, removing some of the invasive weeds in the Santa Clara River, like arundo, that are very fire prone. And we started listening and learning, and what we heard was this need to focus on building collaboration. And so we supported the partners in building this new collaborative that Mason is just mentioned and is leading on the Ventura County Wildfire Collaborative and building those resilience plans together, and helped get the funding to kick that off with CAL FIRE, and also take this conference to its launch and have the first California Wildfire Conference. And so Coastal Quest has been supporting that collaboration and building capacity and helping getting funding on the ground for solutions, reducing fire impact on coastal watersheds and water infrastructure. And we've been we'll talk more about the work on the coastal water resilience and coastal issues. Later today, we'll hear a bit about planning on that, as well as in session 7 tomorrow. But Coastal Quest has also been making some small grants in the community. We made 7 small grants to community groups, such as the community of Foster Park, dealing with flooding and sedimentation issues from the Thomas Fire, with El Concilio Family Services to reduce climate impacts and prepare for resilience. And what we're doing is having them meet, work together, and we're also providing some technical assistance to help them make plans to build resilience and also get funding for the work that they're planning to do, and implementing wildfire resilience in projects in their neighborhoods. So we're really honored to be here, to be working in Ventura County, to be working throughout the state of California, and be amongst so many leaders and amazing partners. The next 3 days are going to be very action-packed, and I'm going to be kind of the overarching MC moderator for the next few days, keeping us moving on the agenda. You'll see me, as Victor mentioned, with little time cards, so speakers beware, so we can make sure we get those breaks and have fun, and keeping us on time and making some announcements. So that all being said, I'll move us along here with some housekeeping. So day 1, we have this conference is over 3 days, and day 1 is focused on planning and collaboration and building wildfire resilience. Day 2 focuses on implementation and action of that resilience planning. And then day 3, we've got 4 field trips planned, so hope many of you can join us on those. And to give you an overview of the agenda today, we're going to start with 7 sessions. They have different kind of themes that are in the program that you can take a look at. Each of them is 45 minutes each. They're going to be very kind of fast talks from the speakers, and then we'll have time for Q&A. After lunch, we're going to have one 30-minute discussion amongst a smaller group of experts. And so we do want to hear from you in the Q&A and encourage you to participate and ask questions to the panelists, and we'll be passing a mic around. So just raise your hand and a microphone will be brought to you. We'll have 2 microphones available for audience questions. And if your question is not addressed during any of the sessions, we encourage you to introduce yourself to the speakers during one of the breaks and continue the conversation. So the QR code is there if you want to see the program in more detail. You can see it on our the website. So as I mentioned to the speakers, as a reminder, I'll be holding up a timing card, a 1-minute warning, and a final stop card at the end of the session. So thank you in advance for just keeping your talk to the time limit, so it gives everyone an opportunity to speak and also for the audience to engage. If you have any questions about the conference or facilities, don't hesitate to go ask someone from the host team or go in the back room over there where everyone is for registration. There'll always be someone stationed over there to address your needs. So now I'd like to open up our first session of the day. And I'd like to invite our speakers to come up on stage. Our first session is focused on federal priorities, resources, and opportunities for planning and collaboration. Our moderator is Rana Joy Sen, officer at the Pew Charitable Trusts. Other speakers are Jennifer Eberlein, Regional Forester, Region 5, USDA Forest Service. Katie Lipicki, Mitigation Division Director, FEMA Region 9. Mike Fulowski, Program Manager at NASA Headquarters. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rana Joy Sen, and I'm from the Pew Charitable Trusts. I'm excited to help kick off the conference with this panel of experts from 3 federal agencies and provide some insights from my organization's work on wildfire spending as well. This panel and this conference are happening at a critical juncture. As most of you are aware, wildfires in the United States have become more catastrophic and costly in recent years. While the past couple of years have been relatively quiet, from 2017 to 2021, 68% more acres burned than the previous 3 decades. Many decisions and actions have driven this increase, but right now, policymakers at all levels are facing tough decisions on how to deal with and pay for the complex set of challenges that our communities and environments are confronting as a result. Our panel today represents 3 federal agencies that play a significant role in tackling those challenges, whether managing forest land, helping communities recover after fires and prepare for the next one, or informing the way we deal with fire through science and technology. I hope you'll join me in welcoming Jennifer Eberlein, the USFS Regional Forester in Region 5, Katie Lipicki, Mitigation Director at FEMA Region 9, and Mike Fulowski, Program Manager of the Applied Sciences, Wildland Fires, and Fire Sense programs at NASA. To get us started, I've asked each of our speakers to provide a brief introduction of themselves and their work, and what their agency is doing in the wildfire space. I'll also add some observations myself from Pew's research, and then after that, we will do some panel questions, and hopefully we have some time for some Q&A. Since we have a short session, I'm just gonna get us started, and I'm gonna hand it over to Jennifer.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Oh, yay, you guys actually responded. I'm so impressed. That's awesome. Okay, now, there was a slight misunderstanding. I don't have a PhD, so now I'm gonna try to figure out how to use this. Is it just the big green button? All right, thanks. Thanks, Sadie. Awesome. So again, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this panel. And when Rana Joy was saying, what are you doing in the world and realm of wildfire, I was like, what am I not doing? I'm trying to do as much as possible. So again, as Rana Joy said, I'm regional forester for the Pacific Southwest region. That region is one of 9 in the Forest Service that covers across the country. My area is California, Hawaii, and the US affiliated Pacific Islands. So the areas such as Guam, American Samoa, Marshall Islands, Palau, Mariana Islands. So I've got that in there, but I'm really gonna be focusing today on California, since this is our California Wildfire Conference. So making sure that you guys know what covers, what national forest lands are in California. So the Pacific Southwest region has 18 national forests in California. We cover about 20% of the land base of California, primarily the mountain areas that you can see on the map that's up there in front of you. What do we provide? We provide water. Over 50% of the drinking and irrigation water that is used in California comes from national forest lands. In fact, that was one of the originating premises for creating national forests, was to protect the headwaters of US rivers for our use and consumption. We provide for recreation. Many of you probably have experienced national forest lands through hiking, biking, camping, going out on trails, driving, seeing the scenery, watching, wildlife watching, bird watching, snow, skiing. Almost all the ski areas are on national forest lands in this country, probably 75% of them. So that's how certainly many of our US and global citizens experience America as well as California through recreation. We account for about half of the public wildland recreation in the state. We provide for habitat for wildlife, fish, and plants. Over 600 of the 800 species of fish and wildlife and plants in California are on national forest land. So we are one of your single largest habitat managers in the state. We provide wood. Another part of what the national forests were established for was to be able to provide wood products for, at that time and probably now, a quickly growing society. We have about roughly $200 and $250 million worth of wood products, both lumber and other types of products that come off of national forest lands for residents, citizens' use. And we provide jobs. Our national forests provide about 24,000 jobs and 2.6 billion of labor in the local economies. But as you heard this morning, and what great presentations this morning, our keynotes were absolutely awesome, and did such an amazing job for me personally. I went, wow, I can cut mine short, because certainly Marshall Berlant and Victor Stephenson, I hope you're still in here, really covered so much of the challenges that we have, because we are in a state of emergency of our forests in the West, and certainly in California, that almost in the West, we have a moderate to very high risk of severe wildfire in nearly a quarter of our forests in this country. We've experienced catastrophic fires. I certainly don't have to tell everybody in this room what that means, and we got a good review of that this morning as well. But they've devastated communities. We have devastated our natural resources. And we need to figure out how to manage that and move through that and have the healing process that Victor was talking about, because it is full-on trauma in some places when you have that coming through. And how do you get that healing process coming back again? So what does the Forest Service saying? We are saying we are in a wildfire crisis. We have a wildfire crisis strategy that was started in 2022, where as an agency, we've identified high-risk fire sheds, we're calling them, similar to watersheds, but fire sheds that usually around 250,000 acres or larger, that have the highest risk, the most community damage, infrastructure, habitat. I've got 1 minute, so Tegan's doing her job. We're looking at how to strategize on giving very good strategies on right time, right place, right amount, right tools in order to get risk reduction on specific landscapes. So we're focusing some major funding that came through the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act to really give kind of big blocks of money to these landscapes that we can work together to create risk reduction in that area. My biggest thing that I want to share, and this was touched on by our fire marshal here too, was that we can't do it alone. There is no way that any of us can do this alone, just like we're talking about Ventura Fire Collaborative. The ability of us being able to come together, focus our attention and leverage our resources, and again, we're doing this through the California Forest and Wildfire Resilience Task Force that I'm a co-chair of with Secretary Crowfoot, State Secretary for Natural Resources, being able to really leverage our resources, partnerships with private entities, non-governmental organizations, our tribal nations, local leaders, all levels of government to really get together, get our programs and projects aligned, and be able to tailor the priorities to the risks for specific regions, which those 4 regions in California are broken up. It is a bottom-up building, using and working with the knowledge that you all have in this room instead of a top-down approach. How do we meet each other in the middle, getting our green tape cut, providing as much resources as possible, expertise, data, monitoring, sets of resource kits, and then working with our communities and building up what you need to do, because you are the ones that really know what needs to happen in your communities. So I'm gonna leave it at that because I wanna make sure I get time for my colleagues, and I know we'll have more time to talk. So thanks, everybody. I'll turn it back over.
Hi there, I'm Katie Lipiecki. I'm the Mitigation Division Director out of FEMA Region 9. That area of operation covers California, but also covers Nevada, Arizona, Hawaii, and our Pacific territories of American Samoa, Guam, and the Northern Marianas Islands. So pretty large area of operation and geographic span. Also included in that are 157 tribal nations, which we also do partner with quite closely. So I was asked today to speak a little bit about the programs that we have available through FEMA mitigation funding and some of the opportunities that have just been released. So I'm not going to go through every single program in great detail. There is not enough time for that. But in general, we have 2 buckets of funding. We have our post-disaster mitigation funding opportunities, which, as it sounds like, are available post-disaster. The main one is our Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, and then we also have HMGP, that Hazard Mitigation Grant Program post-fire. They're very similar, but a little bit different. And then we also have, pretty new, within the last few years, a lot more funding opportunity in the pre-disaster mitigation space, which is really exciting, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these programs. We have our Flood Mitigation Assistance Program, which is primarily focused on funding and protecting NFIP, or National Flood Insurance Program insured structures. We also then have our brand new Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Program, or BRIC. How many people in this room have heard of that program? A good amount, but not as many hands as I had hoped. So I'm really glad that we're talking about this program today. There is a lot of interest, a lot of funding in this program to really build resilience, help our communities adapt to our changing climate, and really incorporate large-scale nature-based solutions and really incorporating that climate resilience component into mitigation funding. We also have our pre-disaster mitigation program, which is a smaller program with a little bit less money available. All right, so what's going on then in some of the space of that BRIC program that I mentioned and other exciting things in our programs? So we just released, pretty exciting, our Community Disaster Resilience Zones. These were just announced in September. The purpose of these zones is to build and strengthen community resilience by really driving federal, state, local investment into these areas that have identified as greater need, have been identified as having more risk. And so by first identifying these zones, the hope is then that we're going to be able to really, again, put that funding to these areas at most risk. Within California, there's 51 zones that were designated by census tract. In September, these zones were designated for all 50 states and the District of Columbia. Up next, this fall, we're going to be designating the tribal zones and those for our territories as well. Those are going to be the first 2 tranches of zones. Then we're going to come back and take a look, figure out what our lessons learned are, and do a 3rd announcement. Those are going to be later, and I don't know all the exact timing for those, but stay tuned on the website. I think it's being developed. So we keep getting asked, okay, cool, I've been identified as a cedar zone, now what? Well, in the BRIC Notice of Funding Opportunity that was just released, which I think it just opened up a couple weeks ago, actually, there is funding that is being driven toward communities that are in these zones that have the need for increased funding. That interest and the benefit that they're getting is a reduced cost share, so from the 75-25% to 90-10 federal-local split. So that's just one of the ways that we're trying to support these communities. Other federal programs, other federal agencies are encouraged to start identifying how their programs might be driven to prioritizing funding in these spaces. You'll have to speak with them, wait to hear if their notices of funding opportunity are incorporating some of these zones. But know that the FEMA BRIC program is one of the first, and we're excited to see this get prioritized. So what's available? We have just announced that there's $1 billion, billion with a B, available for a BRIC program this year. It is a slight reduction from the prior year, but it is still a ton of money. Also, $800 million is available for our FMA program. So how to access these funds? Well, first, we always encourage that you talk to the state. CAWFC is our prime partner in this space, so certainly coordinate with them. We acknowledge that some of these funds are hard to access, and so like with the CEDARS program, we're trying to reduce those barriers to entry and making sure that those communities that need this investment, this funding, to protect themselves from wildfires, from other natural hazards, that they can access it. In the Notice of Funding Opportunity this year, there are a couple of new ways that we are trying to reduce access, or reduce barriers to access and increase access. Some of those are making it easier for projects to be found cost beneficial. Pretty exciting projects under $1 million. Applicants have the opportunity to submit a narrative to help identify the benefits, and FEMA will help with that BCA. There's another great program. If communities need more assistance, they can apply for the BRIC DTA program. And really, it's super wide-ranging, and everything from planning to identifying good types of nature-based solution projects to building partnership networks are potential opportunities on that menu that could be considered. I say it's one of the easiest federal application forms I've ever seen in my life. It is a very simple form, so go on, take a look, and see if you're interested and your community could use that additional support. Application period is currently open and closes February 29th. One thing though, there's funding out there, but communities here in California are getting access to that funds. These are competitive, but California has been very successful at getting access to these funds. And here's an example. And I think this ties to some of the types of projects and priorities that we heard CAWFC mention. Sonoma County has a wildfire resilient project that has so far been partially funded, really with the intent of building that resilience, doing hazardous fuels reduction, hardening the structure. This is a great example of a project, and we're hoping to see a lot more of these. One thing though, I mentioned we had $1 billion in one program, $800 million in another. There is not enough time. There's also not enough funding available to fully address all of the needs. As you've heard my partner say, as you heard CAWFC say, this is a shared responsibility, and so it's identifying what type of other tools in our toolbox we have available to us so that we can build the resilience of our communities. Some of it's going to be federal funding, others is going to be locally based, locally driven planning decisions, and really, happy to see this group here and happy to work with you on how we can partner with that shared responsibility to build resilience. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. I do have a PhD, so that means I'll have no idea how to use this thing. The big green button, look at that. All right, so yes, good morning. Michael Falkowski from NASA headquarters. My job is based in Washington, D.C., although I do sit up in the Bay Area. I'm working remotely from the Bay Area at our research station up in Mountain View. At NASA headquarters, I currently manage 2 different programs related to wildfire, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about today. And they're all falling under this new redesign that we're doing at headquarters called Earth Science to Action. So just out of curiosity, how many people in the audience here realize that NASA does earth science? Okay, a fair number. That's actually a really high amount of people compared to most audiences I speak to, which is really great. And so, yes, we do indeed do earth science. We're a science and technology pathfinding organization. We do a lot of engineering and technology development, and we develop sensors, computational systems, and models, for example, to better understand the Earth system and, as a whole and how it operates. Some of these sensors we put on aircraft, some we put on satellites in space, and we've been doing fire science in one form or another for at least 50 years with the launch of the first Landsat satellites back in the 1970s that were used way back then for burn scar detection and mapping. And those capabilities have, of course, increased and transitioned over the years. A lot of people also don't realize that a lot of the decisions that federal agencies, state agencies, tribal organizations might make are driven by NASA data. And this whole redesign of NASA Earth Science to Action strategy is to really enhance how NASA data feed this decision-making process. And wildfires is one of the new focus areas for this Earth Science to Action strategy. And it's really focused on taking our foundational knowledge that we've built over the last 50 years in Earth observation and modeling and transitioning that up this chain in the decision-making process with the ultimate goal of transitioning that technology to operational users in the fire management space. That could, in the applied sciences program that I run, that could be state, local, and federal partners, for example, or it could be insurance companies, it could be a government in another country, for example. So that program is very broad in terms of the stakeholders it serves and also the global reach. The other project that I'm going to talk more extensively about in the next few minutes is this FireSense project, which is a effort that's really targeted in the U.S. It's only focused on the U.S., and it's really focused on transitioning NASA technology to decision makers in state, federal, local, and tribal agencies. So I'll just spend a couple minutes talking about FireSense. And a couple of unique things about this FireSense project is that it's stakeholder driven. This project, this fiscal year 23, which just ended October 1, was the first year that we were in existence, although we've been planning since fiscal year 22. And the first thing we did when we heard that we were going to design this program is we engaged in stakeholders in a really large stakeholder engagement workshop. We had about 800 participants in the US from state, federal, and local agencies that came and told us about some of the barriers that their organizations face in integrating science and technology into their operational decision-making protocols. Based on that, we designed the FireSense program around that. And based on what we heard in the workshop, we decided to focus our initial efforts in 4 different use cases that you'll see on the slide here: in the pre-fire environment, the active fire environment, the post-fire environment, and then also air quality. Air quality kinds of spans several different parts of the fire life cycle, so we broke it out as its separate use case. In the pre-fire environment, some of the things that we heard from stakeholders and that we're focusing on is improvement to mapping fuel composition and structure. We certainly have satellites and aircraft sensors that can help us do that. But another thing we heard was improvement of soil moisture mapping. And certainly at NASA JPL in particular and NASA Goddard, we have sensors that can fly in airplanes and some radar sensors that are going up that are going to be really useful tools for measuring soil moisture and fuel moisture. And so actually we've been doing an airborne campaign as part of FireSense for the past month, and we've flown several aircraft over sites in California, Colorado, Utah, and Arizona, where we had coincident soil moisture and fuel moisture measurements to evaluate the utility of these technologies for mapping fuel moisture. And soon to launch a satellite called NISAR, which can also help in this regard. In the active fire environment, we heard a lot about this need for 24/7 detection and tracking of fire. And again, we're making investments in sensor technologies that can potentially be more lightweight. Thank you, 1 minute remaining. Have lower power requirements that can go on maybe high altitude aerial vehicles, for example, that can sit and just hover over the western US for 60 days maybe, or even small sats. A small sat constellation, for example, could be developed to push towards this 24/7 detection and tracking of fire. And of course, post-fire environment, improved mapping of burn severity, impacts to water quality, human communities, risks of landslides or other things that we're investing in, and then air quality is the same. And the key thing I'll point out here is that each of these are being co-developed with stakeholders. We've had conversations with CAWFC, the U.S. Forest Service, FEMA, and other agencies like the NOAA and EPA already, and we're continuing to do that to help us not only define but refine what we're going to be tackling in the next 5 to 10 years with this FireSense project. This is not an inclusive list of stakeholders, so if you're interested from a different agency or tribal organization, state or federal, please come talk to me as well today, and I can get you involved with the process. And then my last slide is just to point out, so I sit in the Science Mission Directorate at NASA headquarters, which is the middle column here, and these bullets here kind of reflect some of our interests, so tool development, modeling, sensor development, really towards improved fire prevention and risk assessments. There are 2 other mission directorates within NASA that have interests in wildfire. We have our Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate that are focused on the aeronautical side of things, and they're really interested in developing an air traffic control system to better manage air resources and airspace over active wildfires. This could include pushing towards 24/7 fire suppression, nighttime operations, and integrating UASs into more effectively into the sort of fire suppression space. And then we have our Space Technology Mission Directorate, who has a whole variety of vehicles available for funding opportunities, like the SBIR programs, for example, in tech development, are all managed by STMD. So I think my time is up. I'll turn it back over to our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. As I said, my name is Rhonda Joyce Sen. I'm from the Pew Charitable Trusts. How many of you have heard of Pew? Now, is it the Pew Charitable Trust or the Pew Research Center? Because the Pew Research Center, I think, is the one that most people know of. They do surveys, the news. The Pew Charitable Trust, I think our reputation has actually grown the last few years. We are a large organization. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization based out of DC. We have several government performance and environmental portfolio projects that work with states on technical assistance. We provide resources, and we build relationships to affect change in government. My particular team, what we've been doing is we've been looking at how natural disasters are affecting state and federal budgets. We've seen the growing severity of natural disasters, including wildfire, and that's why we're here today. And we want to identify strategies on how to address those challenges that the states and the federal government are facing. Last year, we released a report called Wildfire Burning Through State Budgets. With that report, we worked to lay out the complex way wildfire management is funded in the U.S. and some of the challenges that are coming from increasing wildfire costs. In doing so, where we found data, we saw that at the federal government level, wildfire growing spending is increasing tremendously. Now, to put some dollar numbers to that, at the federal level, combined spending by the Department of the Interior, U.S. Forest Service, doubled from FY 2011 to 2020. Here you can see that federal growth over time from the Department of Interior, U.S. Forest Service, and FEMA. We don't have the 2022 data yet. It's still cycling. Hopefully we'll have some additional information by the end of the year. Now, along with the federal dollars rising towards these disasters, we're seeing the same at the state level. For example, Washington State tripled its wildfire spending when you compare the first half of the 2010s to the second. And one of the biggest points we make in our report is that government spending on wildfires is increasingly complex. First, wildfires aren't just limited to suppression. It happens before, during, and after fires. That includes activities that you all are keenly aware of, that we heard of from our keynote speakers as well today. It also happens across levels of government, and many entities and agencies are involved, as you can see by this web here. We know that federal, state, and local governments all have responsibilities related to wildfires that start on their own land. It's a complex system. You throw in federal money, which includes grants, and it becomes increasingly frustrating for people to really get the true cost of wildfires. And with this growing spending and this complexity in mind, we wanted to better understand the impact on public budgets with our particular interest in states. We did so by doing interviews within 6 states: Alaska, California, Florida, Nevada, Texas, and Washington. We interviewed state and federal forestry, emergency management and budget officials, and other wildfire experts. And I wanted to highlight three themes that came away from the interviews that took place for our report. Those are to measure, manage, and mitigate. Now, by measure, I mean truly understanding and quantifying the impact of wildfires on a state's budget, particularly as it relates to tracking expenditures. Our research found that states generally do not have a comprehensive picture of the total cost of wildfires, which obviously is critical to budget for them. And we have seen one step in the right direction here in California, which has been tracking its spending on wildfire mitigation via online dashboard. Through that, though that could be expanded to capture even more spending. By manage, we mean looking at the ways that wildfire costs are disrupting a state's budget. We found that most states are using backwards-looking estimates. In some regards, that could work well, but the problem is if you're just putting a pot of money into your base budget to address the wildfires, as they increase, you have to keep putting more money in, and backwards estimates might not work. And by mitigate, we mean prioritizing investments in wildfire risk reduction to alleviate the growing budget pressure resulting from rising wildfire costs. We've seen investments being made in California, where $2.7 billion has been appropriated over a 4-year period towards mitigation. Other states are investing their own dollars as well, such as Washington, which committed $500 million over 8 years, and Alaska, which recently made $15 million appropriation for fire breaks. Now, before I wrap up, I wanted to ensure that folks are aware of a major effort that's just culminated at the end of September. The Wildland Fire Mitigation and Management Commission recently released their final report with their recommendations. We probably will hear more about this report during this conference, but they directed Congress, federal agencies on how they should track spending, manage their budget, invest more effectively in mitigation, all themes that our report have as well. So this opportunity in this report is actually really exciting to us. I know I have run out of time. I have a link here for our wildfire report. If anyone has any questions about this report, you could actually just put Pew Wildfire Report in a Google search, and it does come up. And I have my information is here as well. But our whole panel and myself will be here, so please ask us any questions that you have about our presentations. But since I do have my panel here, I wanted to throw out a couple of questions from them to give their perspective on some of the work that they're doing. The first question I wanted to ask is, what is one thing that you can say about how you would have improved federal, state, and local collaboration?
So what are some ways to improve state and federal collaboration and coordination? So first I want to acknowledge what strong state partners we have, and especially here in California. I mentioned earlier that we do partner as our primary partner for mitigation funding through CAWFC, but CAL FIRE is also a very strong partner. California Department of Water Resources is another partner. And I think what makes those partnerships really, really solid is the communication and coordination. But certainly there's always room for improvement. In the space of wildfire mitigation projects, one area that I believe my state partners would concur on is some of these projects are really big, really have high dollar value, and are very complex. And so for that type of project, I think that from the local, state, and federal level, we would really benefit from prior coordination before the project's submitted, especially for these really large, complex projects, getting together, better understanding what the intent is, what is going to go into the application. And then there's a lot of opportunity there to make sure that we're all on the same page about what type of supporting documentation would be needed and could be gathered earlier in the process, rather than going back and forth for multiple rounds of requests for additional information. So I guess just very much from like a project perspective, I would say coming together and just making sure we're on the same page early in the process for some of these complex projects.
Do you want us all? Hey, okay. So again, Rana Joy, it was how feds and states can work better together?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think we have a really good model right now. Like you've heard already today on our task force, and that's certainly one place where we're trying to, as Chief said this morning, the 26 agencies of the state, as well as bringing together the federal agencies with Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service in that arena along with local communities, governments, tribes, all sitting at the table together to figure out what do we want to do on this piece of land. So along, just like Katie had said, I think it's really leveraging your resources, but knowing what each other has, knowing what the concerns are, knowing and agreeing on the goals that you have. It sounds simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy. So it's really sitting down and spending the time together, just like you have all seen in this county on that collaborative. That's what it's going to take, is spending some time, which is the one thing we can't get back, is you have to spend the time on it and realize. I'd also say too that we have so many opportunities right now on funding or other types of resource opportunities. It's how do you align those so it actually makes sense in terms of a funding stream. When you have multiple, we're trying to figure this out, you guys. We all have different bosses. We all have different goals on some of our grant opportunities, like Katie was saying. But how can we align them as much as possible so you're not applying for 50 different types of grants or 50 different types of project money? How do you get that more aligned so you know what a funding base or a resource base you have? So I'll leave that.
Great. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. I mean, to me, it really boils down to fundamentally to communication, careful communication. If we don't explain our position very carefully, but more importantly, if we don't listen and really hear what somebody else has to say, we're sort of dead in the water. Fire is a really wicked problem with so much complexity in it and so many competing interests and ideas. And so I think just having forums with open and honest communication to talk to each other and learn from each other is critical.